I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is HarrisX founder and CEO, Dritan Nesho. Dritan, thanks so much for joining me.
Hi, Brittany. Thanks for having me today.
I'm really looking forward to this wide-ranging conversation about the February Harvard Caps Harris poll. In short, it seems to be good news for Republicans, good news for Donald Trump, not so good news for Democrats. So let's talk about Donald Trump first. You have his approval rating, and it's pretty good. What is the president's approval rating? What do voters think about him about 1 month into his second term?
Well, it's one of the best approval ratings that, frankly, Donald Trump has had not just in this presidency, but across his public life. He starts off at 52% job approval, and his favorability is also at 50%, with a net favorable of 7 points. So far, so good for him as he starts the new administration. And what we're seeing is the public has very much of a wait and see approach on the new Trump administration. They want to give Trump the ability to play his hand and make or push for some of the changes that they elected him to push. But they're also still concerned about inflation. They're still concerned about the economy. They're still concerned with the style of how Trump does what he does. And so at this stage, it's very much a wait and see approach, right? And you have this strong out of the gate position for Trump, this trudging approval, which is steady and perhaps slowly moving up. But we'll see really over the course of the next month or two whether he can sustain it and really he can grow it and crystallize it into a real 50% plus approval on everything that he's doing.
And I'm sure you and I will have those conversations in later months, seeing how it all plays out for the president. But as of now, his favorability, his approval is strong. So where is he seeing moves in that support? Break it down by demographics. Are you surprised at all in any specific group that is moving to support Donald Trump more than ever?
So I would say that we are seeing positive shifts in approval and positive movements in approval amongst the groups that supported the president, right? And so when you look at approval amongst Republican voters, it's at 89%. Approvals amongst male voters is at 57%. But what's surprising in the data is that his approval, for example, with younger voters is actually not bad, right? For 25 to 34-year-olds, he's at 46%. That's better than he's performed in the past with this group. For 35 to 44-year-olds, he's at 54%. 45 to 54, he's at 57%, so inching upwards. So some really strong findings for Trump, and the picture holds up also when you look at Hispanics, right? His job approval is at 50% with Hispanics. That is actually a better job approval than his performance with Hispanics, right? Trump won about 40% and change of the Hispanic vote, but actually his approval is significantly higher. He's outperforming his vote performance with Black and African American voters. His approval is at 33%, which again is better than his voting performance. And even with, I would say, with urban and suburban voters, right? His approval with urban voters is at 49%. Urban voters tend to break Democratic usually. His approval with suburban voters is at 50%. Suburban voters are very much battleground voters. And of course, with rural voters, he's at a high of 58%. So the groups that really either showed momentum towards Trump in the election and he made gains with, like Hispanic and Black voters, or the groups that are the mainstay Republican voters and supporters of Trump, he's doing very well with each of these groups coming out of the gate.
I'm curious to talk about some other Republican names here and see what voters think about them. First, I want to talk about second in command, J.D. Vance, the vice president, because if we look back to the summer when it was announced that he was Trump's running mate, people the sentiment was didn't really like him with those resurfaced childless cat lady comments. I mean, he's really had a 180 now. He won CPAC's straw poll for 2028 Republican nominee of who people want to see. A few other cabinet members like RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard had a tough time going across the line from nominee to confirmed to Trump's cabinet. What do people think about these people?
Well, as one of the most eloquent members of the Trump administration, J.D. Vance has really acted as the rhetorical sort of spine of the administration so far. Obviously, he shocked European allies at the Munich Security Conference by commenting on the state of democracy in Europe and saying that they needed to do a lot more for free speech inside of Europe, reiterating a lot of Trump talking points, but in a way that was both shocking and effective. And really, he has done a good job of building up his image with the Republican base and also with independent voters. And that's why when we look at his favorability, he has a favorability of 42% and an unfavorability of 38%, a net favorable of 4%, and the rest, don't really have an opinion on him. So it's better than it's been for JD Vance in recent memory as well. His favorability rating. So I think that JD Vance is providing a valuable service to Trump and to the administration by really being the solicitor for all of the initiatives that they have and communicating effectively to different audiences, the broad public, but also different elites in the country, elites abroad, why the Trump administration is doing what it's doing.
And what about those other Republicans or people in Donald Trump's cabinet? Overall, are they getting this sort of Trump bump where Donald Trump's doing well in approval and favorability, so they're benefiting off that as well?
Yeah, I mean, you see several members of the cabinet who have strong and rising approvals. Um, you know, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has always been well liked by the public. He has a favorability of 46%. His unfavorability is 37%. So he actually has the largest net positive approval at 9% of all of the figures that we polled. Um, Tulsi Gabbard is at 28% favorability, plus 3% in terms of her net favorability. It's similar picture for Pam Bondi, who is not as well known. She's at 24% favorability, plus 1% and growing. And when you compare this with the net favorability of Kamala Harris, minus 14 points, 39% favorable, 53% unfavorable. Joe Biden, minus 24 points, 34% favorable, 58% unfavorable. And other figures like Chuck Schumer, minus 18 point difference or net favorability, 23% favorable, 41% unfavorable, and so forth. You see a stark picture, right? And their numbers were not this bad. Even a few months ago, what's happening is really a reassessment and a reconsideration of the Biden administration and key figures both within the administration and in Congress. And right now, off the gate, people think that the Trump administration has shown a lot more vigor and a lot more energy and a lot more work than the Biden administration did. 58% in our poll say that Trump is doing a better job than Biden did as president. And that really kind of brings these favorability numbers into focus, right? That there's a wide gap that has emerged now between the favorability of key Democrats and even the Democratic Party and the favorability of key Republicans and the Republican Party.
I think I would be remiss if I didn't bring up Elon Musk when talking about the first month of President Trump's second term in office. He is the face of DOGE, which has been slashing federal agencies, federal jobs, things like that. Their goal is to reduce federal spending, and he seems to be that he is on a tear trying to do that. What do people think about Elon Musk?
Well, despite being out front on all the issues that DOGE is dealing with and the subject of a lot of attention, positive from the center right, but largely negative from both the center and the left, Musk is doing just fine. His approval has, or his favorability has taken a little bit of a hit, but he is net neutral. 44% approve and are favorable towards him, 44% are unfavorable towards him. If you remember, before the election, he had a net positive favorability, but it hasn't really slid by more than 6 points or so from where he was before. And the reason for that is because voters overwhelmingly support cutting down government expenditures. 67% say that the current level of the US federal debt is unsustainable. 83% favor cutting government expenditures over raising taxes as an alternative for how the government can generate revenues. 77% say that a full examination of all government expenditures is necessary. 70% believe that government expenditures are filled with waste, fraud, and inefficiency. And that includes a majority of Democrats, or a full 58% of Democrats, of independents, a full 75% of independents, and Republicans, a full 78% of Republicans. So it's no surprise that a full 69% of voters today support the goal of cutting $1 trillion or more in government expenditures. And frankly, 60% say that DOGE and Elon so far are helping make major cuts in those government expenditures. So largely a supportive picture, a very supportive picture when it comes to the work that DOGE and Musk have undertaken. And I think that we'll see public opinion crystallize on these issues based on the receipts, right? Based on whether or not Elon is able to ultimately deliver on the $1 trillion in cuts. I would say that the only controversial element of the DOGE initiative so far has been access to private data and information. So while the majority of Americans believe that DOGE and its principals should have access to full information on government expenditures in order to make the right call on what expenditures need to be cut and are unnecessary and what expenditures should continue going forward. 58% say that DOGE employees should not have access to sensitive information about Americans, social security numbers, addresses, incomes, names. Essentially, that's where they draw the line, right? And this is a majority of Democrats who say that sensitive information, should not be readily available. 63% of independents, so close to two-thirds of independents, and even 40% of Republicans believe that as well. But this is the only controversial issue around DOGE so far for the general public. And again, it's very different than if you see the evening news and what they're commenting about. The public is less concerned which agencies are shut down and a lot more concerned about the federal debt and how to make the federal debt sustainable and kind of shrink it as quickly as possible.
Dritan, I said this earlier in the conversation that the White House reposted some of the numbers coming out of this poll. I don't think the DNC would be reposting the numbers coming out of this poll about the Democratic Party because it paints somewhat of a grim picture for the left. Ever since really November 6th and on, in conversations I've had talking about the election, talking about the White House being lost by Democrats, Democrats not having control of Congress or the Senate either. People have said that the Democratic Party has everything from a messaging and branding problem to it's completely facing an identity crisis. It's completely rudderless. Based on your poll, based on your findings, what do people think about the Democratic Party right now?
Well, in our poll, the Democratic Party has the lowest approval rating since at least March 2018 in our polling. It's at 36%. In line with the overall approval of Congress, but significantly behind the approval that voters today are giving to the Republican Party, which is 51%. And so this is problematic because you have not only a majority of independents, 70% disapproving of the work of the Democrats, but 33%, 1 in 3 Democrats disapprove of the work of the Democrats too. Today. And on the other side, the party has not really come up with a strong strategy and a strong set of messages on how to handle Trump. As a consequence, 66% or 2/3 of the public today basically says the Democrats should not stonewall on Trump's initiative. They should take a wait and see approach, right? They should define a clear set of principles that they stand for, but not be obstructionist. And in cases like government expenditures, they actually want the Democratic Party, 2/3 of voters want the Democratic Party to work with Trump and jump on the wagon of cutting government expenditures. So the Democratic Party needs to find its footing. And this poll shows that voters in general, but even an important part of Democrats, a third of all Democrats, are just not happy with the performance of the party so far.
I would love to go through a lightning round, if you will, of Trump's latest policies, starting with tariffs. Because when he came into office and even before so, he promised tariffs, threatened tariffs, used tariffs as a negotiation tactic. Trade wars were almost started and paused with some of our allies. Trade war was started with China. What do voters think about the move and the use of tariffs?
Well, now we get to some of the cautionary tales in the poll, and what the Trump administration really should be concerned about. So tariffs are a wonderful example of that, right? 57% view tariffs as an effective foreign and economic policy tool. And even 44% or a plurality of voters believe that tariffs on imported goods will increase U.S. government revenue. So far, so good, right? But on the other side, close to 2/3 of all voters, 62%, believe tariffs are going to raise prices for everyday goods. And that includes 50% of Republicans, 62% of independents, and 3 in 4 or 75% of all Democrats. Given how concerned the public is about inflation, this is where Trump's approaches on tariffs can go south real quickly. And it really will depend on whether or not he can show progress with the tariffs. And I think that once you go even deeper into the tariffs, the public overwhelmingly, 61%, supports reciprocal tariffs, imposing tariffs when tariffs are imposed on us, and believe that 53% of voters believe that reciprocal tariffs will cause other countries to lower their tariffs on U.S. goods. Effectively, it's a way of getting other countries to back off. So they believe in the story that tariffs can help us get concessions from other countries, but also close to a majority, 49%, say that tariffs on Mexican Canadian and Chinese imports will harm rather than help them in their day-to-day lives, and will harm rather than help them on the economy. So again, a split picture on the tariffs, and while the voters are giving Trump the ability to use tariffs for the time being, there's also this very high concern of what the tariffs could lead to, namely inflation, that is the elephant in the room when it comes to this policy for Trump. So he's got to be careful with tariffs, and there's a window in which he can be successful. Otherwise, voters will likely start shifting their perspectives on this specific issue.
And what about immigration? Because when we saw Donald Trump running against President Biden and then Vice President Kamala Harris, we saw the Trump campaign trying to pit themselves against Biden and Harris, saying they opened the borders, we're going to be tough, we're going to have a slew of actions on borders. And since the first day, he signed a ton of executive orders and other measures and actions on the border. Are voters pleased with his performance so far on border security and immigration?
Well, look, I mean, 81% say that they support deporting immigrants who are here illegally or have committed crimes, and 76% also believe that we need to close the border from illegal immigration by adding security and policies that discourage illegal crossings. Where voters break with Trump is on the question of birthright citizenship. And actually, a majority of voters believe that children who have been born in the United States to illegal immigrant parents should be given their citizenship. And actually, an even larger number believe that that it's a requirement in the Constitution, birthright citizenship. So they break with Trump on that specific issue. So while they're in favor of strong borders, in favor of deporting illegal immigrants, especially those who have committed crimes, they take a more lenient approach with immigrants who are already here, especially with regards to children and with regards to the question of birthright citizenship. And this is consistent, right? Voters have always believed that on the question of the immigration, the best path forward is a grand bargain between the positions that Trump has brought forward, the strong border and the deporting of illegal immigrants, and a pathway to citizenship for the dreamers, the DACA recipients, and again, on the issue of birthright citizenship, a path for these children who have been born in the United States and their families.
Dritan, before I let you go, I do want to quickly look abroad. As we look at Ukraine, we have passed the 3rd anniversary of the war in Ukraine. And Donald Trump has made some comments about this, saying it's Ukraine's fault. As we know, Russia did invade Ukraine. He's called Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky a dictator. How do people feel? What is the sentiment 3 years later about the war in Ukraine?
Well, a majority of voters are very realistic about the situation in Ukraine, that this is a war with no ending in sight, and a war that has claimed now possibly millions of lives. So they support ending the war in Ukraine, but they oppose leaving out Ukraine and Europe out of the negotiations. And 57% also say that they oppose the Trump administration forcing Ukraine to make territorial concessions to end the war. And 66%, 2/3, at the same time say that Ukraine should receive security guarantees from the US if it were to make concessions. So again, another cautionary tale and another split issue for Trump, especially in this case in foreign policy. American voters in general, they don't like dropping their allies or dropping their friends, right? And while they agree with Trump that security guarantees should be contingent on Ukraine sharing revenue for rare earth elements, and the United States should not be footing the bill, the massive bill of supporting Ukraine militarily over the last 2 years, but also the security guarantees. Um, so while they support sort of the elements of Trump's negotiation style, they don't support, Trump leaving Ukraine out of the negotiations, Trump forcing Ukraine onto a solution that forces them to cede and make territorial concessions. And also another cautionary note, which is close to two-thirds of voters believe that Russia will continue to advance onto other countries if it successfully claims Ukrainian territory. So when it comes to that precedent, they want Trump to hold the line. And we'll see how this negotiation unfolds. But where we stand today, while voters don't really have appetite for sending more money to Ukraine at this stage, they want Trump to negotiate tough on behalf of Ukraine, not against Ukraine as part of these negotiations.
And finally, I want to get what voters are thinking about President Trump's comments on Gaza. He promised that if he were elected president, he would bring peace to the Middle East, essentially end that war between Israel and Hamas. He also surprised many experts when he said that he thought the United States should take over Gaza. What do Americans and what do voters think about that?
So, look, again, a bit of a cautionary tale on foreign policy. So, to date, 54% of voters support how Donald Trump has handled the Israel-Hamas conflict so far. They support him pushing for all of the hostages to be released and warning serious consequences for Hamas if they don't do so. And they also support a strong stance by the United States in support of Israel, and also in making sure that powers like Iran, which are believed to be behind the October the 7th massacre in Israel, right? They stop creating instability and terror and war in the region. On the other side, though, 70% believe that the U.S. taking over Gaza is a bad idea, and 56% oppose removing Palestinians from Gaza to rebuild the territory. Two-thirds, 67%, have heard of Trump's proposal, and close to half believe that Trump was being serious, 47%, but really the majority, 53%, say that he was posturing in order to start negotiations with the other Arab states, which really need to step up and offer a solution for how Gaza needs to be managed. The public today doesn't accept Hamas continuing to rule Gaza, doesn't believe that the Palestinian Authority is able to rule Gaza and to manage Gaza, and at the same time, they're not in favor of Israel taking over Gaza. So really the only practical solution is for Middle Eastern states to come forward and offer a solution for what happens to Gaza. How do we rebuild Gaza? How do we give the Palestinian people a brighter future going forward? And in the absence of that, Trump basically stepped in and said, well, if no one is willing to do this, then the United States will take over Gaza and do it. And that's where voters are not quite sure. Is he being serious? Is he not being serious? This doesn't sound like the best idea for them, especially given how wary voters are of increasing expenditures abroad and being engaged in new conflicts or potentially new conflicts abroad. So again, a split picture on Gaza as it is on Ukraine and several of these foreign policy issues.
Dritan, it sounds like this is a wait and see, but it sounds like plenty of things that you found in this poll are wait and see. And then I'm excited about that because that means we get to wait. And then when we do see, you'll be back on breaking down the numbers with us. Dritan Nesho, thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure. And the full findings are at HarrisX.com for anyone who wants to go in depth. Thank you.